Rich love, empty heart. Have you ever reached a place you once dreamed of, only to feel strangely empty when you arrived? Not empty like, I need a vacation, but empty like something inside your chest forgot how to breathe. This video is for you if you are tired, disappointed, or quietly wondering whether all this effort is really worth it. In the next 20 minutes, I want to walk with you through a real story from my own life in the United States, a story about money, love, marriage, children, and the kind of pain that no amount of success seems able to fix. 3 weeks ago, I was sitting in a large, quiet house in America. The kind of house people admire. Good neighborhood. Safe streets. Enough space for everyone. On paper, it was a rich life. But inside that house, something felt very small. My heart. And maybe, if you're honest, you know that feeling too. You might be learning English right now with big hopes. You tell yourself, if I improve my English, my life will get better. Better job. Better income. Better future for my family. That belief is not wrong. But here's the part nobody tells you clearly. Progress without emotional connection can feel surprisingly lonely. Your brain can be busy learning words like success, achievement, or financial freedom, while your heart is quietly asking a simpler question, am I okay? In those 3 weeks, my days were full. Meetings, bills, school schedules for the kids, conversations that sounded polite but felt hollow. My partner and I talked a lot, but we didn't really connect. You know the difference. Talking is noise. Connection is warmth. And warmth was missing. Psychology has a simple explanation for this. The human nervous system is not impressed by money. It cares about safety, closeness, and being understood. When those needs are not met, your body reacts, even if your bank account looks healthy. You feel tired for no clear reason. You lose motivation. Even learning something you once loved, like English, suddenly feels heavy. Your brain isn't lazy. It's overwhelmed. I noticed this during my own English practice. I would read a sentence slowly, clearly, simple English, but my mind drifted. Not because the sentence was hard, but because my emotions were loud. Emotional pain steals attention. That's not weakness. That's biology. Studies show that stress in relationships reduces working memory and focus. In simple words, when your heart hurts, your brain struggles to learn. And yet, I kept practicing. Slowly. One sentence at a time. I spoke out loud, gently. Money does not equal peace. Simple words. Easy grammar. But saying them felt heavy, because they were true. English became more than a language. It became a mirror. Maybe you're watching this while feeling stuck, not only in English, but in life. You might think your problem is discipline, or intelligence, or time. But sometimes, the real problem is emotional exhaustion. When love feels conditional. When success feels lonely. When your inner voice whispers, is this all? Here's the quiet truth I learned in that beautiful American house. Wealth can decorate your life, but it cannot sit with you in silence. It cannot listen. It cannot repair emotional distance. Only awareness can do that. Only small, honest moments. So as we begin this story together, don't rush. Listen slowly. Read carefully. Speak gently. Let this not just be English practice, but emotional breathing space. Because before money fixes anything, something else must happen first. And that something starts here. 3 weeks in America. Imagine waking up every morning in a place that looks like stability. The same kitchen. The same quiet street. The same polite smiles from neighbors who wave, but never really see you. That was my America for 3 weeks. Not dramatic. Not tragic. Just emotionally flat. And that, strangely, was the hardest part. If pain screams, you react. If pain whispers, you doubt yourself. You tell yourself, nothing is wrong. I should be grateful. And that sentence, I should be grateful, can slowly silence everything you actually feel. Those 3 weeks were full of routines. Drive the kids to school. Answer emails. Plan dinners that everyone eats, but no one remembers. At night, my partner and I sat on the same couch, scrolling different screens, sharing the same space, but living in different emotional rooms. We weren't fighting. We weren't shouting. Which made it more confusing. Because society teaches you that problems look loud. But real disconnection is quiet. You might recognize this pattern in your own life. Especially if you are learning English as an adult. You study after work. You listen to videos like this one. And sometimes you ask yourself, why is my motivation gone? You blame age. Or memory. Or accent. But what if the problem isn't English at all? Neuroscience gives us a helpful clue. The brain learns best when it feels safe and emotionally regulated. When your emotional system is busy scanning for threats, rejection, disappointment, distance, it uses energy that would otherwise support learning. That's why, during those 3 weeks, even simple English felt heavier than usual. Not difficult. Just tiring. I remember one evening clearly. My child asked me a simple question, why are you always busy? The words were small. The grammar was perfect. The impact was brutal. Children don't care about income. They care about presence. And in that moment, America didn't feel like opportunity. It felt like absence. That night, I practiced English differently. I didn't open a textbook. I didn't chase vocabulary. I spoke slowly to myself, almost like therapy. I am here. I am listening. I am learning. Short sentences. Calm pace. This is something I want you to try too. When motivation disappears, slow down your English instead of pushing harder. Slowness tells your nervous system that it's safe again. There's research supporting this. Slow speech reduces cognitive load. It gives your brain time to process sound, meaning, and emotion together. That's why slow English practice works so well when life feels heavy. It doesn't fight your emotional state. It works with it. During those 3 weeks, I also noticed how money changes time. You would think more money gives you more freedom. In reality, it often fills your schedule faster. More responsibilities. More expectations. More pressure to make it worth it. And when time becomes crowded, emotional conversations are the first thing to be postponed. You tell yourself, we'll talk later. But later becomes weeks. Weeks become habits. And habits quietly shape your marriage, your family, and even your relationship with yourself. Here's the uncomfortable insight. Emotional distance doesn't come from bad intentions. It comes from unexamined routines. The same is true for language learning. You don't fail because you're incapable. You drift because no one taught you how to learn when life hurts. So let me say this clearly, slowly, in simple English. If you feel tired, you are not broken. If English feels harder lately, it may be because your heart is carrying extra weight. And that weight deserves attention, not judgment. Those 3 weeks in America didn't destroy my life. They revealed it. And once something is revealed, it can be changed. But not with money. Not with pressure. And definitely not with speed. It starts with noticing. And staying. Money changed everything. People say money doesn't change you. That's a comforting lie. Money changes everything. Just not always in the way you expect. In my case, it didn't turn life into a party or solve old problems. It rearranged priorities, rewired conversations, and quietly shifted the emotional climate of my family. Before money became a constant presence, decisions were simple. We talked more. We argued faster. But we also repaired faster. When resources are limited, emotions are visible. You feel them. You deal with them. But when money arrived, steady, serious, respectable money, it acted like soundproof walls around uncomfortable feelings. The problems didn't disappear. They just stopped making noise. During those 3 weeks in the US, I noticed how often conversations started with numbers. School fees, insurance, taxes, investments. Even future dreams were discussed like spreadsheets. Practical, logical, efficient. But love does not speak the language of efficiency. Love speaks in pauses, eye contact, and unfinished sentences. And those were slowly missing. You might think this has nothing to do with learning English. But it does. Because when your life becomes performance-based, earn more, do more, achieve more, your brain treats learning the same way. English becomes another task to optimize, another box to check. And when you don't feel immediate progress, frustration builds. Psychology calls this instrumental living. Everything becomes a tool for a future payoff. The problem? The human nervous system doesn't live in the future. It lives now. So while your mind says, "This will be worth it later," your body says, "I'm tired right now." That's when motivation collapses. I saw this pattern clearly in myself. I would sit down to practice English listening, slow, clear audio, perfect for learning, and instead of curiosity, I felt pressure. I wasn't listening to understand. I was listening to perform. To prove something. To justify the life we had built. That pressure drained the joy out of learning. Money also changed silence. Silence used to mean rest. Now it felt suspicious. Like something important wasn't being said. In marriage, silence can be peaceful or dangerous. The difference is emotional safety. And safety doesn't come from financial stability alone. It comes from feeling seen. One night, I realized something uncomfortable. We were protecting the lifestyle more carefully than the relationship. That happens quietly. You avoid difficult talks because they might disrupt things. But what you're really protecting is comfort, not connection. And comfort without connection feels empty. There's a well-known concept in behavioral science called hedonic adaptation. It means humans quickly get used to better conditions. A bigger house, higher income, nicer environment, your brain adapts fast. But emotional needs don't adapt away. They stay. If unmet, they surface as anxiety, numbness, or irritability. Sometimes, as loss of motivation to learn anything new. So if you're watching this and wondering why your English progress feels stuck even though your life is better, consider this gently. Maybe your emotional system is overloaded. Learning requires curiosity. Curiosity requires safety. And safety requires honesty. I started changing one small thing. I stopped timing my English practice. No goals. No pressure. I listened slowly, not to improve, but to be present. When a sentence resonated emotionally, I repeated it. Not for pronunciation. For meaning. Money can support life, but it cannot replace connection. Simple words. Heavy truth. That shift mattered. Because learning is not just cognitive. It's emotional regulation. When you remove performance pressure, your brain opens again. Studies show that intrinsic motivation, learning for meaning, not reward, activates deeper memory systems. In plain English, when you care, you remember better. Money changed everything. It exposed what we valued. It revealed where we were avoiding discomfort. And it taught me this: wealth amplifies what already exists. If connection is weak, wealth makes the emptiness louder. If awareness grows, wealth can become a tool, not a substitute. This story isn't about rejecting money. It's about putting it in the right place. As support. Not as medicine. Because emotional pain doesn't ask for luxury. It asks for attention. Love under pressure. Love behaves differently when it's under pressure. Not the dramatic, movie-style pressure where people shout and storm out of rooms, but the slow, invisible kind. The kind that shows up as politeness, as efficiency, as "we'll talk later." That was the pressure living inside my marriage during those weeks in America. Pressure doesn't come from money itself. It comes from what money represents. Expectations. Sacrifice. The unspoken belief that if we've worked this hard, things should feel better by now. And when they don't, disappointment turns inward. You stop asking for what you need, because you don't want to seem ungrateful. This is where love begins to shrink. You may notice this pattern in your own relationships. When life gets demanding, emotional expression feels like a luxury. You focus on logistics. Who picks up the kids? Who pays what? Who has time? Love becomes management. And management is terrible at holding feelings. From a psychological perspective, chronic pressure activates the stress response system. Cortisol stays elevated. Your brain shifts into problem-solving mode. Useful for work. Terrible for intimacy. Because intimacy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability feels unsafe when your nervous system is on high alert. During those weeks, our conversations followed a script. Calm voices. Reasonable words. But no emotional risk. No, I miss you. No, I'm scared. Just updates. And when love becomes updates, it slowly forgets how to be felt. I noticed the same thing happening with my English practice. Under pressure, I wasn't curious. I was cautious. I avoided speaking because I didn't want to sound foolish. That mirrors what happens in relationships. When you fear doing it wrong, you do less. Silence feels safer than mistakes. Here's a simple truth. Love and language learning fail for the same reason: fear of imperfection. We stop showing up fully because we don't want to disappoint. But connection requires exposure. In language, that means speaking imperfectly. In love, that means sharing unfinished feelings. One evening, something small cracked the surface. My partner asked, "Are you okay?" Not as a problem-solving question. As a human one. I paused longer than usual before answering. That pause mattered. It told my body this moment was different. Safer. I answered slowly. Simple words. Honest ones. I feel far away. Not angry. Not blaming. Just true. And something shifted. Not magically. But noticeably. The pressure didn't disappear. But it softened. This aligns with attachment theory. Secure connection isn't built by fixing problems quickly. It's built by naming internal states. When you name a feeling, your nervous system calms. That's why slow, simple language works so well, both in English learning and in relationships. Complexity overwhelms. Simplicity soothes. I want you to try this with your English. Choose sentences that carry emotion, not information. Speak them slowly. I need time. I'm trying. This is hard. These sentences train pronunciation and emotional clarity at the same time. 2 skills. 1 practice. Love under pressure doesn't break loudly. It compresses. And compressed things either transform or crack. Transformation starts with release. With breathing room. With small moments of truth. Money adds weight to the system. Expectations add more. But pressure alone doesn't destroy love. Avoidance does. That night didn't fix everything. But it reminded me that connection begins where performance ends. Where we stop managing and start admitting. Because love doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be felt. Marriage in silence. Silence in a marriage is rarely empty. It's usually full of things that didn't feel safe to say. Not arguments. Not accusations. Just small truths that waited too long and learned how to stay quiet. During those weeks, silence became the main language in our home, and it spoke fluently. There is a strange comfort in silent routines. You wake up. You function. You cooperate. Everything works. From the outside, it looks stable. But inside, something is slowly disconnecting. You stop sharing thoughts that might cause tension. You tell yourself you're being mature. In reality, you're being careful. And care without intimacy turns cold. Silence feels especially dangerous, because it doesn't feel like a problem. There's no explosion. No clear moment when you can say, this is when it went wrong. Instead, there's a gradual emotional distance. Like 2 people walking the same path, but at slightly different speeds. Neuroscience explains why this hurts so much. The human brain is wired for co-regulation. We calm each other through shared emotion. When communication becomes purely functional, that regulation disappears. Your nervous system stays tense, even if life looks calm. This tension shows up in unexpected places: sleep issues, irritability, loss of focus. Yes, even difficulty learning English. I noticed that silence made my thoughts louder. At night, when everything was quiet, my mind replayed conversations we never had. Questions I never asked. Sentences I rehearsed but didn't speak. This mental noise drained energy. And drained energy makes learning feel impossible. You might think silence protects relationships. But emotionally, silence is interpreted as distance. Especially by children. They sense shifts before adults do. One afternoon, my child asked, "Did we do something wrong?" That question landed hard. Because children often assume responsibility for emotional changes they don't understand. That moment forced me to slow down. Not just my English. My life. I realized I had been avoiding discomfort in the name of peace. But peace without honesty is fragile. It looks smooth until it suddenly collapses. In language learning, silence has a similar cost. You understand more than you speak. You wait to be ready. But readiness never arrives. The longer you stay silent, the bigger the fear grows. Silence feeds anxiety. Expression reduces it. Research shows that naming emotions, even imperfectly, reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. In simple terms, when you say what you feel, fear loses power. That applies to marriage and to English speaking. So I practiced differently. I spoke aloud, slowly, about ordinary feelings. No drama. I feel tired today. I miss closeness. Basic sentences. Clear sounds. Honest meaning. Speaking became an act of self-connection, not performance. I also began breaking silence at home in small ways. Not with big conversations. With moments. Sitting together without phones. Asking open questions. Listening without fixing. These actions don't look impressive, but they rebuild emotional safety. Silence isn't always bad. Sometimes it's rest. But when silence becomes avoidance, it quietly erodes connection. In marriage, in parenting, in learning, growth requires expression. If you're struggling with English, ask yourself gently, where else in my life have I gone quiet? Sometimes, improving your voice in one area helps you reclaim it in another. Because silence feels safe. Until it doesn't. Children feel first. Children notice emotional changes before adults admit them. Not because they are smarter, but because they are more honest with their senses. They listen with their whole bodies. During those weeks, my children felt the shift long before I named it. They didn't say, "There is emotional distance in this household." They asked simpler questions. Why don't we eat together anymore? Why are you always busy? Questions like these are not accusations. They are signals. And if you ignore them, children start creating their own explanations. Usually, they blame themselves. Psychologists call this emotional attunement. Children are wired to monitor their caregivers' emotional states for safety. When the emotional climate changes, their nervous systems react. They become quieter, or louder, or unusually well-behaved. These are not personality traits. They are coping strategies. I saw this clearly one evening. We were financially secure. The house was calm. But my child was restless. Fidgeting. Asking repeated questions. The environment looked safe, but felt uncertain. Money had built walls, but it hadn't built warmth. This matters for language learning more than you might think. Children don't learn best from instruction. They learn from emotional context. A child exposed to multiple languages thrives when they feel safe and connected. Adults are the same. Emotional safety is the foundation of all learning. I began practicing English with my children differently. Not as a lesson. As shared time. We read short sentences together. Slowly. We repeated phrases. Not to correct, but to connect. When they laughed, my nervous system relaxed too. Learning became relational again. There's strong scientific support for this. Studies in developmental psychology show that shared attention and positive emotional states significantly improve language acquisition. Translation: when you feel connected, your brain opens. When you feel tense, it closes. One night, my child asked, "Are you happy here?" That question was heavier than any financial decision I had made. Because happiness isn't about location. It's about presence. And presence had been missing. I answered honestly, using simple English. I'm learning how to be. Not perfect grammar, but perfect truth. That honesty mattered more than fluency. This experience taught me something important. We often believe we are working hard for our children. But children don't need perfection. They need regulation. They need adults who can name emotions and stay present with them. If you are learning English while raising children, this is powerful. You are not just learning a language. You are modeling emotional courage. When your child sees you practice slowly, make mistakes, and continue, they learn resilience. Without a lecture, money can provide comfort. But children don't feel comfort from numbers. They feel it from tone, from attention, from time. Those weeks reminded me that healing doesn't start with fixing the marriage or optimizing the schedule. It starts with regulating the emotional field of the family. And children are always the first to respond. If you want to know how healthy a family truly is, don't look at income. Listen to the children. My breaking point. Breaking points are rarely dramatic. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a quiet moment when your body says, "I can't keep pretending this is fine." Mine came on an ordinary afternoon, in a place that should have felt like success. I was alone in the car, parked outside a grocery store in the US. The engine was off. The radio was silent. And suddenly, I felt exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. Not tired from work. Tired from holding myself together. From being functional. From being lucky. That's when it hit me. I had everything I once thought would make life easier: money, stability, opportunity, but I was emotionally depleted. And emotional depletion is sneaky. You don't collapse. You just stop feeling fully alive. Psychologically, this is called emotional suppression fatigue. When you repeatedly push feelings aside to keep things running, your nervous system eventually pushes back. You lose motivation. Focus drops. Even simple tasks, like slow English listening, start to feel overwhelming. I noticed this clearly. I pressed play on an English audio I normally enjoyed. Clear pronunciation. Easy pace. But my brain resisted. Not because I couldn't understand. Because I didn't want to engage. Engagement requires energy. And I was empty. That's when I stopped. I didn't force myself to continue. I sat there and said, out loud, very slowly, "I am not okay." 4 words. Simple grammar. Heavy meaning. My shoulders dropped. My breathing slowed. Something inside finally unclenched. This moment matters, because naming a state changes the state. Neuroscience shows that labeling emotions reduces stress responses. In normal language, when you say what's true, your body relaxes. That relaxation is essential for learning, connecting, and healing. My breaking point wasn't failure. It was feedback. Feedback that the strategy one was using, pushing through, performing, optimizing, wasn't sustainable. Money had allowed me to avoid discomfort for a while. But avoidance always sends the bill later. I went home and spoke honestly. Not perfectly. Not dramatically. Slowly. I said I felt disconnected. I said I missed warmth. I said I didn't want to live efficiently if it meant living empty. These sentences were basic. But they were brave. That night, I practiced English again. Differently. I chose sentences that reflected where I was emotionally. I need rest. I want closeness. I am learning. I repeated them gently, not for accent, but for alignment, between my inner state and my outer voice. Here's what I want you to hear clearly. Losing motivation is not a personal flaw. It's often a sign that something inside you needs attention. Before discipline. Before strategy. Before money. Breaking points are invitations. They ask you to change direction, not speed. And that's where everything began to shift. Why money can't heal. Money is very good at creating distance from pain. And that's exactly why it feels comforting at first. When something hurts emotionally, money gives you options: travel, distraction, upgrades, convenience. You can move houses, change routines, buy silence. But distance is not the same as healing. It just delays the moment when you have to sit with yourself. During those weeks, I realized how easily money turns into anesthesia. Not medicine, anesthesia. You don't feel the pain as sharply, but the injury underneath remains untouched. And when anesthesia wears off, the pain often feels worse, because it's been ignored. From a neuroscience perspective, emotional healing requires integration. That means feeling, naming, and processing emotions through language and connection. Money skips that process entirely. It changes circumstances, not internal states. That's why people with fewer resources, but strong emotional bonds often feel more stable than wealthy people living in emotional isolation. I tested this insight in a very simple way. Instead of fixing discomfort with action, I stayed still. When anxiety rose, I didn't open my phone. I didn't plan. I didn't distract. I spoke slowly, out loud, in English. I feel uncomfortable. I don't know what to do yet. These sentences sound basic, and that's the point. Basic language lowers resistance. Complex language hides emotion. Simple language reveals it. This is crucial for English learners. Many people think they need advanced vocabulary to express deep feelings. They don't. Emotional honesty lives in simple structures. Subject, verb, feeling. That's enough. In fact, research shows that emotionally loaded but linguistically simple sentences are remembered better than complex neutral ones. Your brain prioritizes meaning over sophistication. Another reason money fails to heal emotional pain is control. Money gives the illusion of control. Emotional healing requires surrender. You can't budget your way into intimacy. You can't schedule vulnerability. You have to allow uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable, especially for people who worked hard to escape it. I noticed this resistance in myself. I wanted a clear plan, a timeline, a solution. But emotional repair doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in pauses, missteps, and repeated conversations. That felt inefficient. And my brain hated inefficiency. But my heart needed it. So I practiced inefficiency. I repeated the same English sentences for days. Not to improve fluency, but to create emotional safety. I am here. I am listening. This matters. Repetition calms the limbic system. It signals stability. That's why children ask for the same story again and again. And that's why slow English repetition works so well when emotions are raw. Money also complicates shame. When you have everything, you feel less permission to struggle. You think, I shouldn't feel this way. That thought blocks healing faster than any lack of resources. Shame silences truth. And silence keeps pain intact. Let me be clear. Emotional pain does not care about privilege. It responds only to attention and connection. If you deny it because you think you don't deserve to feel bad, it doesn't disappear. It just moves deeper. The turning point for me was this realization. Healing is not about adding more. It's about removing avoidance. Money adds. Presence removes barriers. If you're learning English and feeling stuck, ask yourself this gently. What feeling am I trying not to feel right now? You don't need to answer immediately. Just notice. That noticing alone reduces pressure. And reduced pressure restores curiosity. Money didn't heal me. But it did reveal something important. It showed me that the real work couldn't be outsourced. It had to be lived. Spoken. Slowly. And once I accepted that, learning, real learning, became possible again. Learning English, learning feelings. At some point, I stopped treating English like a ladder I had to climb and started treating it like a room I could sit in. That shift sounds small, but it changed everything. Because ladders are about reaching higher. Rooms are about staying. Before this change, every English session came with a hidden question. Am I good enough yet? That question creates tension. And tension is the enemy of listening. When you're tense, your brain narrows its focus. You hear sounds, but you don't absorb meaning. That's why many learners can understand words, but feel lost emotionally when listening to real English. Once I connected English to feelings, not performance, something softened. I allowed myself to practice on low-energy days. I stopped waiting to feel motivated. Motivation is unreliable. Safety is not. When you create a safe routine, learning happens even on tired days. I began using emotional labeling in English as a daily practice. Not journaling. Just speaking. I feel heavy today. I feel calm now. I don't understand this yet. These sentences are grammatically simple, but neurologically powerful. Research shows that naming emotions in language reduces emotional intensity and increases cognitive clarity. In other words, speaking feelings frees mental space. Listening improved because I stopped multitasking. I listened the way you listen to a friend, without rushing to respond. I let silence exist between sentences. Silence is not wasted time. It's processing time. Especially for adult learners. I also noticed how my pronunciation changed when I slowed down emotionally. My mouth relaxed. My breathing deepened. That matters, because speech is physical. Stress tightens muscles. Relaxation improves sound quality. So emotional work directly improved speaking clarity. English practice also became a way to repair connection at home. I invited my family into my learning, not as teachers, but as companions. We repeated phrases together. We laughed at awkward sounds. Laughter lowers stress hormones and increases dopamine, which strengthens memory formation. Learning became shared joy, not private struggle. Another important shift. I stopped correcting myself mid-sentence. Correction interrupts flow and increases self-consciousness. Fluency grows from continuity, not perfection. Let the sentence finish. Meaning first. Accuracy later. If you're stuck, try this. Speak one sentence per breath. Inhale. Speak. Exhale. That rhythm calms your nervous system and improves speech control. It's a technique used in speech therapy and mindfulness-based learning. Learning English taught me something life-changing. You don't need to be confident to start. You become confident by staying. Staying with the sentence. Staying with the feeling. Staying with yourself. Money didn't give me this lesson. Slowness did. And when language stops being a test, it becomes a place of return. Small actions that helped. There's a quiet lie we're taught early in life. If something feels broken, you need a big solution. A big change. A big decision. A big sacrifice. But after everything I went through, I learned the opposite. When emotional systems are overloaded, marriages, families, even your ability to learn, big changes often overwhelm them further. What heals overloaded systems are small, repeatable signals of safety. The first small action that helped was consistency. Not intensity. Consistency. We stopped trying to fix the relationship and focused on showing up at the same emotional time every day. 10 minutes. No phones. No agenda. Just presence. That predictability mattered more than any deep conversation. The nervous system trusts patterns, not promises. This principle is critical for English learning too. Studying once a week for 2 hours feels productive, but it's neurologically inefficient. Short, daily exposure builds familiarity. Familiarity builds safety. Safety unlocks learning. Your brain doesn't need more effort, it needs less threat. Another small action was changing how we listened. Instead of listening to respond, we listened to understand state, tone, pace, energy. If someone spoke slowly, we didn't rush them. If someone paused, we waited. This reduced defensiveness almost immediately. People soften when they don't feel pushed. I applied the same rule to English listening. I stopped rewinding aggressively. I let sentences pass even if I didn't catch every word. Comprehension isn't built by control. It's built by exposure. Studies on second language acquisition show that relaxed listening improves long-term understanding more than constant correction. We also learned to separate emotion from solution. If someone said, "I'm tired," we didn't reply with advice. We replied with acknowledgement. That makes sense. That one sentence changed the emotional temperature of the room. Validation calms the limbic system. A calm limbic system allows the prefrontal cortex to function. Translation: people think more clearly when they feel understood. This changed how I spoke English to myself. Instead of criticizing mistakes, I acknowledged effort. This is hard. I'm still learning. Self-talk matters. Your brain listens even when no one else does. Research in cognitive psychology shows that compassionate self-talk improves persistence and reduces anxiety during learning tasks. Another surprisingly powerful action was reducing background noise. Emotional noise and literal noise. Fewer notifications. Fewer open tabs. Fewer half conversations. The brain can't regulate emotion in chaos. When we simplified the environment, emotional regulation followed naturally. For English practice, this meant one audio, one voice, one pace. Not playlists. Not multitasking. Just one clear input. The result: better retention with less effort. Learning thrives in simplicity. We also normalized imperfection out loud. In the family, we said things like, "We're figuring this out." In English, I said, "This sentence isn't perfect, but it's honest." Normalizing imperfection removes shame. And shame blocks growth faster than lack of ability ever could. There's a concept in neuroscience called neuroplastic safety. The brain changes best when it feels safe enough to experiment. Small actions create that safety. Big actions often threaten it. One final small action made a deep impact, naming progress that wasn't visible. Not income. Not outcomes. Emotional shifts. We talked longer today. That felt calmer. I stayed present. These acknowledgements train the brain to notice regulation, not just results. If you're learning English and rebuilding motivation, try this today. Don't aim to improve. Aim to arrive. Arrive in the sentence. Arrive in the sound. Arrive in yourself. Improvement is a side effect of presence. Small actions didn't save our family overnight. They didn't erase pain. But they gave us something far more important than solutions. They gave us room to breathe. And when you can breathe again, learning, love, and language all find their way back. Redefining rich life. For a long time, I believed richness was something you could calculate. Add income. Subtract expenses. Measure growth. Compare timelines. That belief is everywhere in American culture. And for a while, it motivated me. It gave me direction. But during those weeks, I realized something uncomfortable. Numbers were telling one story, and my body was telling another. My body felt rushed even when my schedule was full of good things. It felt tense even when there was nothing urgent to fix. That tension was information. Not failure. Information. Redefining a rich life began with listening to that information instead of overriding it. I started noticing how often we equate busyness with value. If the calendar is full, we feel important. If the house is quiet, we feel uneasy. But emotional health works in the opposite direction. Calm is not emptiness. Calm is capacity. Capacity to listen. Capacity to learn. Capacity to repair. When we slowed down slightly, just slightly, something surprising happened. The days didn't feel smaller. They felt more owned. We were inside them instead of chasing through them. That sense of ownership is a form of wealth no salary can buy. This shift also changed how conflict felt. Before, conflict felt dangerous, something that might threaten the structure we had built. Now, conflict felt informative. A signal that something needed attention. When safety is present, disagreement doesn't feel like collapse. It feels like communication. Psychology supports this. Secure systems are not conflict-free. They are repair-capable. The ability to return to connection after rupture predicts long-term relationship health more than harmony ever could. In other words, richness is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of repair. That insight transformed my relationship with English learning too. I stopped seeing mistakes as setbacks and started seeing them as signals. Signals of growth. Signals of stretch. When a sentence didn't come out right, I didn't correct aggressively. I stayed with it. I let it be imperfect and complete. That continuity built confidence faster than correction ever did. I also noticed how redefining richness changed my energy. When success wasn't constantly being evaluated, my nervous system relaxed. Relaxed systems are creative, curious, open. That openness made listening easier. Words landed instead of bouncing off stress. There's a concept in neuroscience called cognitive bandwidth. Stress consumes bandwidth. Emotional safety restores it. When you reduce internal pressure, your brain has more space to learn, to remember, to connect. That's why English started feeling lighter, not because it got easier, but because I had more room. We also redefined what progress looked like at home. Progress wasn't, everything feels great. Progress was, we notice faster. We noticed tension sooner. We named it earlier. We repaired more gently. That kind of progress compounds quietly. Money still mattered. Of course it did. But it stopped being the emotional anchor. It became infrastructure. Useful. Necessary. Neutral. When money isn't carrying emotional meaning, it stops distorting relationships. Expectations soften. Conversations become more human. This redefinition required letting go of comparison. Comparison is expensive. It drains attention and breeds dissatisfaction. When you measure your life against someone else's highlight reel, richness becomes unreachable by design. When you measure your life by how regulated and present you feel, richness becomes practical. I began asking myself one grounding question at the end of each day. Did today feel livable? Not productive. Not impressive. Livable. That question recalibrated everything. Many days were not perfect. But they were livable. And livable days add up to a livable life. If you're learning English in the middle of pressure, I want you to consider this. Fluency is not speed. It's comfort. Comfort with not knowing yet. Comfort with sounding human. Comfort with staying. Redefining rich life is not a philosophical exercise. It's a daily practice. You practice it every time you choose presence over performance. Listening over fixing. Slowness over urgency. A rich life doesn't shout. It breathes. And once life started breathing again, learning followed naturally. A quiet hope forward. Hope is often misunderstood. We expect it to feel like motivation, excitement, or certainty. But real hope, the kind that lasts, usually feels much quieter. It doesn't shout directions or promise outcomes. It simply says, this path is survivable. This moment is workable. That was the hope that emerged after we redefined what richness meant. Not the thrill of a new beginning, but the steadiness of knowing we could continue without collapsing. Before, the future felt like something we had to secure. Every decision carried pressure. Every pause felt risky. But once we shifted our internal definition of success, the future softened. It became less about controlling outcomes and more about maintaining connection with ourselves, with each other, with the present moment. This shift changed how we handled difficult days. Instead of asking, how do we fix this quickly, we asked, what does this need right now? Sometimes the answer was rest. Sometimes it was conversation. Sometimes it was space. Learning to listen to the moment instead of overriding it built trust, slowly but reliably. From a psychological perspective, this kind of hope is rooted in self-efficacy. It's not belief that everything will turn out well, but belief in our capacity to respond. That belief reduces fear. And reduced fear creates room for growth. I noticed that when fear lessened, curiosity returned. I became curious again about people, about language, about stories. English stopped feeling like a test and started feeling like a bridge. I listened not to catch mistakes, but to understand meaning. I spoke not to impress, but to connect. That intention changed everything. When learning happens in safety, it integrates more deeply. Neuroscience tells us that stress narrows perception, while safety broadens it. That's why forcing progress often backfires. The mind learns best when it feels allowed to be unfinished. This understanding reshaped how I practiced. I began choosing content that felt emotionally resonant rather than strategically useful. Stories, conversations, voices that sounded human, not perfect. And paradoxically, my comprehension improved faster. When meaning matters, memory sticks. Hope forward also altered how I related to time. I stopped rushing improvement. I stopped counting how long something should take. Instead, I focused on consistency without pressure. Showing up gently, regularly. That rhythm proved far more sustainable than intensity. At home, this approach created emotional predictability. Not predictability of events, but predictability of response. We knew we could talk. We knew mistakes wouldn't explode. That safety made experimentation possible, in relationships, in learning, in life. One of the quiet realizations I had was this: people don't burn out from effort alone. They burn out from effort without safety. When effort is paired with compassion, it becomes growth. When it's paired with fear, it becomes depletion. If you're listening to this while feeling tired of trying, tired of self-improvement, tired of learning, tired of hoping, I want you to consider a different approach. What if progress didn't require pushing harder? What if it required softening first? Softening doesn't mean giving up. It means giving your nervous system permission to participate. To breathe. To learn. To adapt. English, like life, is not mastered through pressure. It's integrated through use. Through repetition. Through moments of genuine need and interest. When you let go of the idea that you must be fluent to be worthy, fluency becomes attainable. Hope forward is not about a destination. It's about direction paired with gentleness. It's about trusting that small, kind steps are enough. Because they are. And when you build a life that feels livable, day by day, you don't need dramatic hope. Quiet hope will carry you. Sometimes the most expensive thing in life isn't love, or marriage, or even mistakes. It's the lie we quietly believe, that money will eventually make the pain disappear. After everything I've shared with you, one question still lingers. If money couldn't save my heart, then what actually did? The answer isn't dramatic. It isn't a big decision, or a perfect moment. It's something small. subtle, almost invisible. And that's exactly what we'll talk about in the next story. Because this journey of love, of family, of learning English through real life, isn't over yet. In the next video, I'll share what finally helped me reconnect, not just with my partner, but with myself, and how that same shift changed the way I listen, speak, and understand English every single day. If this story made you pause, if it felt like someone was quietly speaking your thoughts out loud, then you're not alone. Leave a comment and tell me, do you think money can heal emotional pain? Like the video if you want more slow, real English stories like this. And subscribe, because the next chapter might be the one you didn't know you needed.